So real pleasure to get to be part of this. I've followed this effort and had conversations with some of the leaders, Spiros and others for a while now. And this topic of placemaking and tourism and sustainability and the nexus of these issues are a real passion of mine, and one I haven't actually gotten to present on in this way. So I'm excited for this opportunity to start this conversation. Hope we can build it further throughout this event and potentially in subsequent years. I'm going to share my screen. Just here we go. So, the topic of tourism obviously is has been of building importance. Over tourism, extractive tourism, the limitations of who gets to be a tourist, and the equitable issues around it have been growing for years. And of course, with the pandemic now, it has given us an opportunity to step back and think about how we can reinvent tourism and how we participate in our communities, in our cities, and how we can address our bigger goals, sustainability goals, but also our other goals that communities have as well. And we increasingly are seeing that connecting the conversations around placemaking, tourism, and sustainability can yield a whole new paradigm in how we think about each of them. And the sort of regenerative model, moving from just sustainable tourism about impacting less, to actually models that create value on the terms of local communities and invite people in ways that contribute to that value, those local values, is an opportunity, and an opportunity that the pandemic is allowing us to have, that we wouldn't otherwise. So we're seeing many different causes coming to the focus of place. My background really is in environmentalism and sustainability. And actually, my father organized the first Earth Day in New York in 1970, and I grew up around a lot of the founders of the environmental movement. So this ECOWEEK focus is something close to my heart. But we've long seen place and public spaces as a means to bring in new partners to those larger goals of environmentalism. But also many other causes, from local food to health to equity to economic development, arts. We're seeing how when these sometimes isolated causes focus on place and placemaking, they can leverage their resources more systemically, address and their issues, and attain deeper change and realize their opportunity. But what we find is often these conversations are in their own silos, and these disciplines are sort of speaking to themselves. And so we use place and public space as a way to ground the conversation on every scale in something more common sense, and something more connected to communities, to make the language more accessible as well, and to make it actionable, to make the conversations grounded. And we think the best places in the world actually bring together a whole range of skills and resources from these, range of these disciplines and others. But right now, the future of cities is not being defined around places. The conversation is still around various solutions, just object architecture, or technology, or even sustainability as an endpoint rather than as a tool, or sustainable technologies, for as an example. So we think if you lead with design and development, you get more design and development. And it's the same. The tourism industry has been defined by designing objects to attract people, or developments that extract from place rather than co-create or build place, or regenerate place. And examples like the Guggenheim Bilbao in Spain have perpetuated an idea that we just need a piece of iconic architecture, or a big institution, or a big museum, often spending millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on an object that has a decreasing returns to scale. Every other city tries to do the same thing. It's not about that place, that culture. I took this picture of these two men right after I was there on my honeymoon, and these men mugged a couple right after I took the picture. I took the picture to illustrate an idea. William White, our mentor, said that blank walls proclaim the power of the institution, the inconsequence of the individual for whom they are clearly meant to put down, if not intimidate. Yet, we continue to build these kinds of iconic buildings that don't create places. And of course, cars and traffic, how we get to places, how we is actually degrading places, how we build transportation through communities rather than to them. And it was not about being against the car, but we have to start to think about how we can be for places. This is the experience of much of America right now, that this is not a place that regenerates itself, let alone the people that participate in it. And Times Square was a project that I've worked on at several different phases. And we really advocated just for not being against the car, but being for experimenting with how it could serve people better through these sort of lighter, quicker, cheaper, tactical interventions. And of course, the best placemaking is very informal often. And that's what we found in Times Square, just putting out temporary seating. But in some of the lowest income parts of the world, more informal parts of the world, people naturally know how to do placemaking. We've had placemaking weeks all over the world. One was in Nairobi, where if they'd said, let's close this road to cars, they wouldn't have succeeded. But they did these temporary experiments and showed all the positive potential of it. And now they are closing it to cars. In Detroit, Michigan, a city where we've worked the most in, there's a whole new narrative through these sort of lighter, quicker, cheaper approaches that is inviting people to be co-creators, regenerators of their city. People that have lived there forever, but also new people are being challenged, supported to help co-create the future of the city through these small types of interventions. In the sort of entrepreneurial spirit, the innovative spirit is growing from that inclusive and co-creative energy. In Mexico City, there's a Fundación Placemaking Mexico that is working all over the country to seed this kind of place governance, which I'll talk about. And this actually particular location helped build resilience for the earthquake. It built the social connections that then were very valuable for the recovery of an earthquake they had in this neighborhood in Mexico City. So William White, again, our mentor, I mentioned, it said it's hard to create a space that will not attract people. What's remarkable is how often this has been accomplished. We don't learn from the processes and informal governance mechanisms that create the great public spaces that frankly draw tourists and draw tourists most sustainably. In great places like this, people conform to their use. Yet when we try to design these spaces, we just copy the design. We don't copy the management and process of them. And people still have this experience when they go to many downtowns or when they're a tourist. They're not likely to come back. The fear that they remember the fear of having to cross a street there. And I know, many parts of Greece still are overtaken by automobile traffic. Yet we're seeing a huge shift. This is the same place actually in Sydney. We took both these pictures. There right before the pandemic. They've finally taken cars off of that street. So there's a real shift happening. This is in Auckland, where they're also removing cars from the center of their street as part of the whole placemaking campaign there. And then during the pandemic, we're seeing greater momentum towards this, as I'm sure you all are as well. This is my neighborhood in Brooklyn. We have these open streets all the time, and the neighborhoods, the parts of the city that organize somewhat informally. Sometimes there's business improvement districts that support it to take back the street, to create comfort for pedestrians. These are the places that are thriving now, and frankly are more lively than ever before. The areas that didn't organize, that the central business districts, the streets that are dominated by one building or big box stores, they're losing out. So it's the smaller scale cooperative, human activity driven businesses that are really succeeding. And the volunteerism, the community spirit sustaining and driving the success of this. People are wanting to connect more with their neighbors, with their public spaces again, and are using public spaces in ways that previously weren't possible, but we are also very much common sense. We're learning how to be part of our community again. And this is in Dumbo, one of the most touristy neighborhoods in New York. This street should have been closed to traffic a long time ago, and now they're making it permanent, because of the pandemic, and it's becoming even more of a tourist destination, but a sustainable one that the locals go to more now, that can accommodate a whole range of uses and user groups. And it's safer. Tourists used to stand in the middle of the street to take these pictures all the time, and now, of course, it's safer for them. Chinatown as well is taken back their streets and done it in a way that creates lots of life. And then the nightlife has taken off more than ever as well, and been more inclusive and accessible to all, where you don't have to go inside and spend a lot of money at a restaurant. You can be out in the street, listen to music. There's bands walking the streets now in ways that were not before. So what is placemaking? Placemaking we see as a collaborative process by which we shape our public realm in order to maximize shared value. It's also strengthening the connection between people and the places they share. So there was an MIT study that found that the biggest benefit of placemaking wasn't actually the improved place, but the improved social capital and the improved capacity that's built through the process of placemaking. So even if you know what you need, or you believe the experts, it's really important that the process builds that capacity to manage and grow and appreciate the projects, the public spaces. So PlacemakingX is an organization we founded a little over 2 years ago to network the placemaking leadership around the world and network the learning, the advocacy, and grow the collective impact of people practicing placemaking around the world. Building on the work we've done at Project for Public Spaces to sort of seed a movement, and that organization is still, leading on a range of parts of placemaking, but we're seeing leadership on placemaking from all over, and that's the idea of PlacemakingX. Isn't to compete with it, it's to highlight and connect all these collaborative and innovative ways that people are leading. So a little bit of history about the movement. It really has roots with Jane Jacobs and William White. My father worked with them in the early 70s, and he founded Project for Public Spaces in 1975. And then we started calling this placemaking in the late 90s, when we really realized that it's not us that's the experts, but the community. And the previous 20 years was really doing a lot of user analysis and observation and interviewing of people to draw out their expertise. But in the 90s, we developed tools to help the community be those experts, and use those same tools to realize how much they know and how much they can do themselves in a community. So we started to see the placemaking movement become global in 2006 or so, and really started to organize, to structure and support it in 2013 with some conferences in Stockholm with UN Habitat and one in Detroit. And they've continued to run dozens of conferences around the world in collaboration with local partners to shape and learn about local placemaking conversations. One was in Wuhan, China, actually in 2018. We launched PlacemakingX in Valencia, Spain, with our Placemaking Europe partners, including Vivian Dumpa, who's part of this conference, in 2019. But really, the core to the movement is this idea that we've led with, is that everyone has the right to live in a great place. More importantly, everyone has the right to contribute to making the place where they already live great. These are some of the conferences that have really helped shape the movement globally, and there's each of them has reports that you draw on from the PlacemakingX website, but there's many more planned. There's one, Placemaking Europe has just announced a conference in Barcelona actually the October 3rd through 5th. We have another one in Flint, Michigan, coming up in September. So placemaking is a word that is constantly debated and and sort of redefined, but it's used quite broadly across the world in slightly different ways. And we think collectively it sort of balances each other out. We want to make sure that placemaking is not dominated by any one group, that it's really an ongoing question of what it means to a community and who gets to do it and how inclusive is it. That we always think that it's not about pushing away one type of leader, but always attracting other people to be part of it. So if it's led by the development sector or the government or the community, whichever, we have to make sure the other groups that are not included are participating and leading as well. So some of the regional networks we've helped launch and supported around the world, all of them are innovating, leading in various ways, and have resources to connect to, and social media to follow and be part of as well. So the mission of PlacemakingX is to be a global network of leaders who together will accelerate placemaking as a way to create healthy, inclusive, and beloved communities. And our vision is to make the spaces we live into places we love, to create a thriving, equitable, and sustainable world through the convergence of values, passion, and action around our public spaces. And we work at sort of three stools, or three sort of foundations to how we work. And one is to advocate for systemic change, to make sure we're not just perpetuating the status quo by just improving some spaces alone. To amplify the leadership that is in every community and the ideas that are there, and then to make sure we're really accelerating impact, because we need to create change faster than we are to be able to sustain human life on this planet. And Cecilia Martinez was one of the leaders at UN Habitat that worked with us to make public space and placemaking part of the new urban agenda and the sustainable development goals. Says that we're creating a global movement to shape spaces into places. So just public space is not enough. It has to have place is a space with purpose and meaning, and it drives more investment in public space that works for those communities, that shares value, that drives cultural, economic, social outcomes as well. So the Sustainable Development Goals 11.7 we advocated for to include public space, and then the new urban agenda, we actually got 10 different mentions of public space in there based on some conferences that we're partners in. And then something we weren't part of actually, but was really relevant, is these keto papers that Dr. Close and Saskia Suss and Ricky Burdett and Richard Sennett did, that really concluded that cities and public spaces need to be incomplete, more porous, and more complex. And they said public spaces need to have multiple uses, be more flexible, and have more informality. Things we'd all been advocating for, but they really see as core to the success of cities in the future, and the ability of cities to allow people without power to help shape them, to have a role to really drive their innovation and creativity as well. So we showed that, we're seeing this convergence of different issues around place, and we're working with the leaders of many different movements to support their focus on place and collaboration with other movements. But one tool we do this with at every scale, and I think is relevant to, I'm excited about some of the workshops you guys are doing, and you may be able to use this a little bit as part of those workshops, is this Power of 10 tool. And the idea is we think a place has at least 10 reasons to be in it. And it's useful to start to focus on the uses rather than the design at first, the functions of a space. And then perhaps a great public space or a great destination has at least 10 places in it, each with 10 things to do in it. And then following on that, a great city or region has at least 10 public destinations, each with 10 places, each with 10 things to do in it. So to use New York as an example, we think its improvement, its transformation has really been led by these public destinations that we're really led first by community groups. They're often groups of people opposing something, opposing the tear down of the High Line, or Washington Square Park, a highway coming into it. by Robert Moses, but they have all succeeded when the community became for something. But that oppositional energy, that negative energy, was often useful for galvanizing some activity. And then the challenge is the type of leadership to move from just being against it to being for something. And so a lot of the same people that were against things then became, leading these efforts and playing the place management role, which is the hardest part and the most important role for public space, is how it's continually evolved, how you fundraise, how you continue to engage the community in taking ownership over these spaces. So we think it's most important not to copy the form or the design of any of these spaces, but to learn from the process and the management and governance of them, and how that, and the financial modeling as well. And then to learn from how they work at that human scale, rather than the big design scale. It's at the scale at which you can make eye contact with people and connect with people that the magic really happens in all of these spaces. And it's actually quite simple. It's not so fancy or expensive, the type of design elements that really enable that kind of contact and connection in place. And, and the idea is that when you have these 10 reasons or so to be in a place, that no one use or user group can dominate it. Tourists can be one of the uses, but they're not dominating the space, and the different age groups, different demographics feel welcome in it and have different activities that they can connect to, but then actually enjoy, often and unintentionally, some of the sort of serendipitous activities that will occur because of the layering of different groups of people. So it's the triangulation that gets people to start to open up, to be more informal, to make eye contact, to talk, to strike up a conversation with somebody. Those are the things that lead to the real memories for tourists, and allow locals to really feel like these places are for them as well. So we've done these exercises all over the world, these Power 10 exercises. This is in Melbourne, Australia, a city that's very livable, but we've been pushing them ever since we did this exercise and revealed they don't have that many lovable places, that they need to be focused on lovability. And our theory has been that if you focus on lovable places, place attachment, places that you feel connected to and want to keep coming back to, you actually can achieve livability more inclusively, and more quickly and more cheaply. And I think it's definitely carries over even more so for the tourism industry. And how do you create places that are lovable? Tourists will respect them. They'll come back to them. They'll spend money and time in ways that contribute to those spaces. Also, even more true in informal settlements or low-income communities. The same, we've walked through favelas in Rio, and some of them are the most unsafe, unfriendly places. Some with a very similar design can be very friendly and safe, and vibrant communities. So again, it's more of a function of the governance and the process through which the spaces are shaped than about the form or design in these cases. And so you can do these participatory exercises, like these are in Colombia, and it's a really great way to have people connect and learn from each other. But process is key as well. And I'll just, we did, these diagrams are actually created out of some trainings we did in the Netherlands, where we were surprised that they were hiring us to do trainings because they do such great public space design there. But they said that traditional planning is you get some engagement, then you do design, then you hope it gets used. They see placemaking as actually drawing more appreciation and creativity for design professionals, but they have to let go. You can't lead with the design solution or design expertise. It's a constant, placemaking is a constant iterative process between use, engagement, design, all driving demand for each other. But most designers, most experts are taught to have the expert, to have the solution and the expertise that they effectively impose on a community. So diving further into the tourism discussion, we've been trying to advance this idea of place tourism. And I recently wrote an article on this in regenerative tourism, that the tourism industry should invest in places, and the tourists should also see themselves as investors in places that they go to. So it's moving beyond being passive consumers of a place or extractive consumers of a place to actually participating in it and even contributing to it. And that's what tourists want to feel like they're contributors, and they want to feel like they have a deeper participatory experience, but often aren't given that opportunity. And that's what the tourism industry needs to create more sustainable places. And then in strong public spaces, and the great public spaces around the world, they actually absorb tourists, actually behave better. They blend in more. They often conform unconsciously to local culture and identity of places, and they have a much richer experience accordingly. So if it's a cheap place, if it's a generic place, tourists misbehave, they dominate, they control. In great places, people rise to the level of the shared experience and contribute to it. They are often driven to connect deeper with people in that area and with the history and culture of that place. And they even display their own personality more, their own culture. They bring something to it in a great place. They smile more. They want to have an authentic experience. They want to spend money in ways that add to that place. So a placemaking approach to tourism development can not only help ensure economic success and manage impact, it can help build local capacity for continuing to manage, maintain, and evolve the destination. So again, it's a focus on place management, governance, engagement, process, dealing with the conflicts. The conflicts between different user groups can be useful, can create conversation, can yield creative solutions, but they do have to be addressed through a facilitative process. And so place management can be key. The destination managers that often focus on marketing or booking hotel rooms or events, we can start to move those people and those skills into more facilitative placemaking role, creating the destinations that the tourism industry is meant to bring people to. So preserving the sense of local ownership is really key to maintaining success and authenticity for both locals and tourists. We all know this, but a placemaking process is a way to create local authenticities, to preserve it, and also to focus on preservation is key, but often just preserving the form or the buildings can make those the preservation vulnerable in a way. So we think the best way to succeed with preservation is actually preserving use and life, and that creating more purpose to those buildings. So placemaking can drive preservation, and the best way to prevent a neighborhood from changing for the worst. A lot of neighborhoods people are scared of tourists or outside investment, but we say it's rather than just opposing it, actually have a vision for what you want your community to be like and invite people in on those terms and showcase your vision, your values in the public realm in ways that you're proud of and that challenge outsiders to respect your community and even support it. Sustainable places need to be constantly recreating and evolving themselves, keeping connections to local history, environment, culture, local ethnicities, while also being culturally creative. We can't just rest on the history, but often the best way to connect to the history is through continuing to grow culture that reflects and respects that history. So just sort of starting to close out on sort of some key principles we recently developed for regenerative tourism through placemaking is the first one is to create places, not objects. So a place is a space that you participate in, that you experience in ways that you don't dominate, and you don't just consume them. So much of tourism is take a picture and check that off and leave. Next, to define tourism around locally driven uses rather than tourist infrastructure. And locally driven uses are simple functions of things people actually need, local businesses, local food, and tourists will want to feel like a local, and they'll want to participate in that local infrastructure, and learn about the local culture that's there. Support holistic, community-based place management and governance. I'll talk a little bit more about this actually right after this, but we think there's a trajectory of governance and investment to the district or community scale, and how we manage main streets and downtowns and squares and waterfronts is really the sort of leading edge of urbanism, and how the tourism industry is a catalyst for this and benefits from this is a key opportunity. We need to shift resources from marketing commercial destinations to creating public destinations. I've had some people in the tourism industry suggest that they should, what if we relocated 10–20% of the tourism marketing budgets to placemaking, to actually creating the destinations that they're marketing, and how great destinations market themselves when they're authentic, when people take pictures in them and share them, when they contribute to them, and when people, the word of mouth starts to travel more authentically. Place branding and marketing also, when it is done though, should start with participatory placemaking. So the best marketing is actually outreach, engagement, asking people what they like about a place, engaging the locals and engaging tourists in questioning what they, how they use the space, how's it working for them, how's it not, how could it work better for them, and starting these conversations. And even some conflict, some debates around these spaces can yield deeper conversations and good press, and even some bad press can lead to good press or good marketing. Then 6, support buildings that support places. Simple idea, but so many buildings are about supporting themselves. They're one museum, one iconic piece of architecture, stores and retail frontages that don't add to the place. So we want to get in the best public spaces, in the best downtowns, each building's competing to contribute to the shared value, to the life of the street, to social life. And that you need to start that you need to model that sometimes, and then other buildings follow. And then lastly, support businesses to support places. Businesses are the drivers of good edges of public spaces, good retail. But again, we often invest in getting chains and the same retail that's all around the world, that's more about advertising in that space, or being extractive of footfall rather than driving it and contributing to the energy of the space. So local businesses time and time again show that they drive more authenticity, more local tax revenue than the model of sort of big box or chain retail that can easily dominate and take over a place that doesn't have local authenticity. We've often worked with like retail consultants that say when you know what the vision is for the place, then you can attract retail that's more local, or challenge chains or bigger stores to adapt and contribute to the place. So again, place-led, leading with the place, is the way to drive retail and development for regenerative local economy, and I think for regenerative tourism as well. So talking about regenerative tourism, but also this phrase community-powered tourism, community-powered placemaking is really what we do. And Agena can lead a new paradigm of community-powered tourism through these types of conversations, through being in this key location. And ECOWEEK, I think, can further build this leadership, convening tourism and placemaking leaders. I'd love to build on this conversation with you all and learn how this really hits on the ground, in how this can be applied on the ground in Ahina. One example, we're actually starting a partnership. We've long been talking to Airbnb. They could be a partner in some of these conversations. It's a platform really trying to disrupt Airbnb, supporting hosts that are of and by a local community, that are not doing it just as an investment property, but are share the values of that community, want to attract tourists on the locals' terms, and then actually a percentage of the fees actually go back into community values, often potentially placemaking projects in that community that further sustain and drive a healthy tourism economy. So supposedly the costs are the same, but because it's a cooperative and because of the values and because of the revenue going to the community, it has a much more sort of virtuous cycle with local tourism goals. So I'm not going to go much more into this, but this but governance, I mentioned, place-led governance is really where this needs to go, and we need tourism managers, place managers to make districts and destinations work. We can't have tourism be sort of an isolated silo in government or a department, but all the departments are often isolated in their goals and in their metrics of success. Increasingly, placemaking, place management is connecting these different departments and their goals and their resources. But eventually, we see a trajectory towards place-led governance that draws much more fluidly on a range of different departments and coordinates a focus on place, on great places as a goal of government, and even more importantly, on building the capacity of communities to further shape and sustain, to regenerate their places as a focus of governance. So no longer should the goal be, how just safety or just events or just design or just recreation, but place. Are we creating great places that we love, that attach us to a community, that build our capacity to work together and address our goals? So going forward, for a strategy can be applying this at a very human scale right in front of our building, our store. A place can have 10 things to do in it. A destination has 10 places. A city, this can, the country of Greece can have 10 great place-led cities or regions. That when people come, they travel to as many of those as possible and contribute to them. And then, of course, being part of the larger Placemaking Europe conversation, and having these parts of Greece be on that grand tour of great places. So placemaking times regenerative tourism, I think, is one of the greatest opportunities to have a big impact and really address our biggest sustainability equitable goals. This picture actually is Vivian Dumpa, who's part of this conference as well. She was a great leader, or is a great leader of Placemaking Europe, and led some of the conferences we've had in the continent. So, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. My father actually studied with Margaret Mead, and I really believe that this, conference, this AHINA gathering place, can be a catalyst for really reinventing the tourism and placemaking conversation. In PlacemakingX, we're here to support you, to build on this, to connect you with other people around the world as you go, and hope you can stay in touch. Get involved with PlacemakingX if it interests you, and you can sign up as an advocate and get involved with Placemaking Europe as well. But I'm going to stop there and take any questions.